I still remember that morning so clearly, not because the weather was nice, but because of the strange silence that enveloped the house I used to call family. On the marble kitchen counter, where my mom used to leave sweet little notes like, "Don't forget to try the wedding cake today, sweetheart." This time there was a folded white sheet of paper, no sender's name, no signature, not a single word of explanation. Just one single line. "Wedding's off. Expect a call from our lawyer." I stood frozen in the middle of that familiar kitchen. No TV sounds, no kettle whistling, not even the smell of morning coffee. All that was left was a cold emptiness, and a horrifying truth slowly coming into focus. I had just been removed from my own wedding. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just texted my mom a single word. Understood. Then I left, like a guest who was never invited. For the next 2 days, my phone was completely silent. No one called, no one texted, no "oops, wrong message" explanations. But then, a message from my cousin Miranda shattered that silence. "Willow? I think this was sent to you by mistake. But you should see it." Attached was a screenshot of a family group chat titled, "Hartley Wedding Updates." I wasn't prepared for what appeared. The entire wedding plan. Still the same venue, same band, same guest list. But the bride's name was no longer mine. They had replaced it with Delilah. My sister. My sister, who had just gotten engaged a few weeks earlier, was now the center of everything I had spent over a year preparing. The florist's invoice had been updated with her name. The photography schedule clearly said Delilah and Owen. The wedding dress I had tried on 4 times was now adjusted to new measurements. And amid the lively messages, Delilah even joked, "Least this time, the dress will be worn by someone who actually looks the part." My mom replied with a heart emoji. My dad sent a champagne glass icon. I didn't know what made my throat tighter. The betrayal? Or how casually they had done it. They must have thought I would stay silent like always. But this time, they were wrong. I started checking everything again. I opened my laptop and created a new folder named Reference Data. The first email I reopened was from the florist. The invoice had been sent to me 3 months ago, addressed to Willow Hartley, wedding flowers in a pastel white-blue tone. Now, the most recent invoice showed Delilah Hartley, palette, peach rose gold. Not a single word was asked of me. "No, Willow, your sister wants to get married on the same date. Would you mind sharing?" No, just my name, completely erased, as if I never existed. I kept scrolling through old emails. Invitations, menus, cake samples, all now bore my sister's name. And me, not one line mentioned. Even documents from the event planner had been changed. Content now read, "Bride, Delilah Hartley, groom, Owen Williams." That had once been my name. And my fiancé's, Hunter, Beckett. I froze. A cold chill ran down my spine. No, Hunter was never named Owen. This couldn't just be a coincidence. Owen was Delilah's old friend. I scrolled back through the family group chat. After years of skimming past, I finally read each message, not just to understand, but to confront what I had long avoided. A message from my mom 7 months ago jumped out at me. "Delilah needs a perfect start. Willow will understand. That girl always manages on her own anyway." Another message from my dad. "Let the wedding go smoothly first. If Willow finds out too soon, it'll just complicate things." I opened a private message from my aunt. It was sent last year, on the exact day I said yes to Hunter's proposal. "Congratulations, sweetheart. But remember, not everyone in the family thinks this is a wise move." Back then, I laughed it off, thinking she was just overly cautious. But now I understand. They had started removing me from the picture long ago. I kept going through old files I had saved out of habit. The wedding budget spreadsheet, handwritten by me, and emailed to my mom for approval. Below the line, Expenses $23,200 paid through Willow Hartley's account, was a note written in my mom's familiar handwriting. Reallocate when necessary. I printed everything. Invoices, appointment schedules, email threads. Even the conversation with the bakery manager, who had called me just a week ago to confirm the updated guest count for Delilah's wedding. Do you still have the original contract? The one with my name on it? He paused for a few seconds, then answered, Yes, but your mom called recently and said you had transferred everything to your sister. I never did that. I opened my laptop, moved each file into the folder, and set a password. I did this to protect myself, to preserve what was rightfully mine. I finally forced myself to face the truth I'd spent years avoiding. In this family, I was never the chosen one. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I was too difficult to control. What once felt like random little things now came back to me with a sharp clarity. Delilah had accidentally shown up at photo shoot appointments, makeup trials, all the sessions I had scheduled weeks in advance. She always pretended to be surprised, always said just stopping by, but later used the exact ideas and images I had put together for herself. Back then, I didn't think much of it. I told myself, that's just what sisters do. That's just how families are. But the truth is, I had gotten used to stepping back, used to thinking I was the one who needed to yield. And that very habit had blinded me. That night, the only light in the living room came from the floor lamp. I sat silently next to a folder that was growing thicker by the hour. I didn't call Hunter, didn't look for explanations, didn't expect anyone to come back. Everything was already far too clear. I flipped through the pages. My name crossed out, replaced by another, as if I were just a side character in my own life. What used to be mine was now redistributed neatly, like property ready to be handed over when needed. And in that stillness, one thought anchored itself in my mind. They might rewrite the story, but I had the original in my hands. I began digging through every contract, every Excel spreadsheet I had once handed to my mom for easier coordination. Back then, I naively believed that letting her manage part of the budget would help ease the burden on both sides. But now, looking back, everything showed signs of interference. On the wedding venue rental contract, my signature was still there, but the primary client name had been altered by hand. No obvious signs of tampering, just a thin black ink line replacing Willow Hartley with Delilah Hartley, like a typo discreetly corrected. The shared expense account my mom and I had used to handle wedding payments was no longer accessible. That morning, when I tried to log in, I received a notification. Access denied. Account no longer linked. I called the bank. A representative picked up after 5 minutes. His tone was polite but firm. I'm sorry, Ms. Hartley. The account ownership was updated to single access 3 days ago at the request of the designated financial guardian. Ms. Nadine Hartley? I froze. You mean my mother? Yes, the transfer documents were notarized and submitted to our main office per procedure. I didn't get angry. I didn't panic. I just saw it clearer than ever. My mother wasn't just controlling. She was manipulating everything. That afternoon, while going through old email folders, a strange message appeared. No saved contact name, but the subject line stopped me cold. We need to talk. I opened it. The first line read, Willow, I know this is long overdue, but I can't stay silent anymore. You need to know that what happened back then wasn't entirely on me. Signed at the bottom, Ethan Calloway. My heart skipped a beat. Ethan, the man I dated 6 years ago, who once said he wanted to marry me, then vanished without a word other than a short message. I can't go on. I'm sorry. Took me a full year to get over that. I blamed myself, thinking maybe I was too intense, too emotional, too difficult to love. And now Ethan wanted to explain? I sent back a short reply. Say it. Almost immediately my phone rang. His voice was the same, deep, slightly hoarse, speaking fast. I know you have no reason to believe me. but I have to say it. Back then, your mom, she called me. She said that if I truly cared about you, I needed to walk away. I gripped the phone. What did she say? That you were unstable. That you had a history of anxiety after college. That if I stayed, I'd be dragging you into a dangerous spiral. His voice cracked. She even sent me a scanned hospital file when you were admitted for exhaustion, remember? She said that if I really loved you, I'd let you go. A long silence followed. I could barely breathe. I believed her. I thought I was doing the right thing for you. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. I just sat there in the living room, letting the sound of the call drift through my head. Not because I still loved Ethan, but because what my mother had done wasn't protection. It was control, wrapped in the disguise of love. I used to think the breakup with Ethan was just incompatibility, but it turned out to be just one of many quiet interventions she had orchestrated to ensure I could never have anything she couldn't oversee. That night, I pulled an old metal box from the bookshelf, the one that held documents I had forgotten I still kept. Inside were copies of the initial deposit contract with the event planner, the handwritten budget list with both my and my mother's signatures, and at the bottom of the stack was what made my stomach drop. An internal financial agreement, with one bolded line. Authorization to coordinate wedding budget. Transfer of financial control to secondary party. Delilah Hartley. The signature line below was mine. Signed 4 months ago, on an evening when my mom told me to sign it just to make the accounting easier. I never read it carefully. Now I understand. I had handed over all decision-making power without even knowing. Not because I was careless, but because I placed my trust in the wrong person. I called Jace that night. I wanted to uncover another truth that had been waiting, and this time, I needed to hear it from his own mouth. When the call connected, his voice was hesitant. Willow, I was just about to call you back. I kept my tone calm, no small talk. I need you to tell me the truth. All of it, right now. The line was quiet for a long time. I thought he might dodge it, but then he exhaled deeply, like he'd been holding this in for far too long. I went to see your parents. About 2 months before I proposed. Your mom invited me to her house, said there were a few things that needed to be clarified before joining the Hartley family. I closed my eyes. The story was repeating itself. Your dad wasn't home. It was just her and a thick envelope, already placed on the table. Inside were old credit card statements, your medical file from when you were 26, and a report from the time you were hospitalized for exhaustion. She said you had emotional instability, that if I wasn't sure I had enough patience, I should reconsider. I didn't react, not a word. I just let him speak. And Jace continued, each sentence slow, like he was forcing himself to confess everything he had kept hidden. She also gave me a prenuptial agreement, called it a precaution. The content. It was clearly unfavorable to you. There was a clause that required you to give up asset ownership if divorced within the first 3 years. She said directly. If you didn't agree, it would affect the family's reputation, and even my career. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you sign it? Jace replied immediately, without hesitation. No. I left the contract on the table and walked out that night. I didn't know if I should tell you. I was afraid it would hurt you, afraid you'd blame yourself again. I let out a short laugh, but it wasn't one of relief. It was bitter. I've already blamed myself my entire life. Jace didn't justify anything. He just said one short sentence. I'm sorry. After the call ended, I sat by the living room window for a long time. Outside, a soft yellow streetlight spread across a thin layer of early winter fog. Everything seemed quiet, except for one thought echoing in my mind. My mother wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to control the person I chose to love. The deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't a series of accidental mistakes. This was a system. A tightly built structure she had crafted from the smallest things, from how I dressed, who I was allowed to see, even my financial future after marriage. Nothing was coincidental. I remembered the night Jace proposed to me in the backyard, under lanterns strung along the fence. My mother had taken photos, smiling brightly, saying it was a wise choice. But thinking back now, her expression wasn't joy. It was the satisfaction of someone who had just claimed another territory on the map she had drawn herself. A part of my life, and Jace's, had been bargained, without either of us knowing. I returned to my desk, pulled up the scanned prenuptial agreement that Jace had sent me after our call. I read every line carefully. The content was like a polite legal warning. If things didn't go their way, they had the right to take everything back. There was even a section clearly stating that refusal to sign may result in discontinued financial support for the Hartley family. At that moment, I didn't feel betrayed. I felt awakened. I opened my laptop, created a new folder named Evidence, Phase 2. Inside, I saved every document related to the meeting between my mom and Jace, including the unsigned contract, screenshots of messages, and the bank memo about revoked account access. If this was a chess game, she had made too many bold moves with confidence. But what she never expected was that I, the daughter she thought was always obedient, had learned how to flip the board. Only this time, everything would be documented, thoroughly, and legally. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My mind was unusually clear, no more fog or hesitation. After everything, Delilah's betrayal, my mother's manipulation, the truths Jace and Ethan had both confessed, I knew. If I didn't act now, there'd be nothing left to hold on to. I opened my laptop. Inside the folder titled Evidence Phase 2, everything was ready. Wedding contracts, email exchanges, the concealed financial agreement, photos of banking documents, and even statements from outside parties. Every detail was labeled, time-stamped, organized with no gaps. I drafted the email, subject line, Official Notice, Termination of Unauthorized Interference. Ms. Nadine Hartley. All actions involving asset transfers, manipulation, and interference in my personal life have been documented and stored. Should any such actions continue, public or anonymous, I will proceed with all necessary legal measures. This is the final warning. I hit send. 1 second later, the tightness in my chest that had lingered for months suddenly released. Not because I expected my mother to change, but because I had stopped waiting for that change. But just 2 days later, a response arrived, not from my mother, but from the law firm representing the Hartley family. I received a firm envelope in the afternoon mail, marked with a red stamp and bold lettering, Civil Lawsuit Notification, Willow Hartley. Inside were 12 pages of accusations, written in cold, clinical language. Unauthorized access to financial accounts, embezzlement of wedding funds, signs of psychological instability damaging the family's reputation. I didn't feel shocked, just stunned they had truly gone that far. To construct a story where I was the fragile, greedy, out-of-control villain. To hide the truth that they had taken pieces of my life one by one. I set the lawsuit down on the table, took a deep breath, and called Emma Rowe, the attorney I had worked with on a previous community project. I need to file a countersuit for defamation, reputational harm, and unauthorized use of personal information, I said, my voice steady. And I have evidence. Emma didn't ask why. She said only one sentence. Send all materials to the office. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning we start. The next day's meeting lasted nearly 5 hours. I presented the full timeline, flipped through every contract, described how I had been removed from financial documents, had my signature forged, and lost access to shared accounts. Emma examined each copy carefully, taking notes at such speed I wondered if she ever stopped to breathe. Finally, she looked at me and said firmly, "They may be powerful in name, but what they lack is precision. We'll countersue, and this time, justice will have your name at the top. In the countersuit filed that afternoon, we listed 3 primary charges: deliberate defamation intended to damage personal reputation, unauthorized use of private medical information, falsification of financial documents, and intrusion into personal assets. Attached were all the supporting materials: the email from my mother to Jace, pressuring him about the prenuptial agreement, bank statements showing the wedding funds had been moved into an account under Delilah's name, and the original contract with my signature, edited after the fact. I wasn't just defending my name. I was redefining the boundaries entirely. That night, I sat alone by the living room window. Everything was still as it had been every night before, but this time, the silence no longer carried helplessness. It was the stillness of someone who had filed in court, no longer someone bracing under pressure. And even if they continued to lie, continued crafting stories to their advantage, all I needed was to bring the truth into the light, with documents, with stamps, with time-stamped dates. 3 days after the countersuit was filed, I received a strange email. No subject, no signature, just one line in the body. I can't stay silent any longer. I'm ready to provide copies of the transactions and records from that year. The email came from an anonymous address, but the sender info gave me a clear hint. Mason, J. M. Former Finance. I immediately forwarded it to attorney Emma. Within a few hours, she called me back. Her voice carried a hint of excitement I had never heard from her before. Willow, this is the witness we never expected, Mason Jennings, the former accountant for the Hartley for Change Foundation. He was in charge of the books when the foundation operated under your mother's name, and he kept every backup copy. I held my breath. I had waited for this moment far too long. For years, I believed that by staying silent, by preserving the family's image, I was doing the right thing. But silence had only made me complicit. 3 days later, Mason met Emma and me at a small cafe near downtown, where he had worked before leaving the industry due to burnout. His face was a bit gaunt, his eyes wary, but there was clarity in his gaze that inspired trust. He opened a leather case and pulled out a thick stack of documents, neatly organized with pale yellow dividers. Over 4 consecutive years, Miss Nadine gradually transferred charitable donations from the foundation's account to a private trust under her and Mr. Hartley's names. Each transfer fell below the audit threshold, but in total, it added up to more than $96,000. I flipped through the pages. The transactions were masked under harmless labels like media expenses or event contingency funds. But the recipient accounts were personal, and each form bore the phrase, "Authorized by Willow Hartley," in italics. I had never signed those documents. Emma whispered, "If we go public, they'll be facing both financial investigation and signature forgery charges." I nodded. And right then, I knew there was one more thing I had to do. That night, I reopened my old social media account, the one I had deleted the app for because I couldn't stand seeing my family post wedding photos of Delilah every day in the dress I had once chosen at the venue I had booked. I changed the profile picture to a plain gray. Then I wrote, "My name is Willow Hartley, and this is the truth they tried to bury. Over the past year, I have been removed from my own wedding, had my signature forged, was accused of mental instability, and most recently, was sued by my own family. But today, I will not stay silent anymore." Beneath the post, I attach images of the documents. The wedding budget contract with a forged signature. Financial reports from Mason Jennings proving unauthorized transfers. Email exchanges between my mother and Jace discussing the prenuptial agreement. A message from Delilah bragging finally the real bride. And a voice recording of my mother saying, "She's all feelings. That charity fund's still there, but what has she even done with it?" I didn't explain, didn't defend, didn't justify. I let the evidence speak for itself. Less than an hour after the post went live, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, comments, inboxes. Even people I had gone to high school with began resharing it. The hashtag Justice for Willow appeared in dozens of posts. One account that reviews civil lawsuits reposted the entire story with the caption, "If you ever thought family drama only existed on TV, read this." A woman named Dana Matthews, who had worked in law in Portland, commented, "I used to work with the Hartley Foundation. What Willow posted today matches the irregularities I suspected 3 years ago." Line by line, the truth began to spread, like light leaking through cracks. No one in my family responded right away. No statements, no denials. Maybe they were waiting to see if public attention would fade. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I had reclaimed what they once tried to erase: my voice. Court day arrived on a windy, dry October morning, just like how I felt stepping down the stone steps of the Richmond County Courthouse. Not scared, but clear-headed. I wore a long gray coat down to my knees, my hair neatly tied up, and walked into courtroom number 4 with attorney Emma by my side. In my hands was a thick binder, copies of everything I had gathered over the last 3 months, complete, clearly numbered. Across the room, my mother, Nadine, sat next to her private attorney. She avoided my eyes. Delilah didn't show up. Maybe they thought her absence would soften her presence in the paperwork. But no one could erase her name from the documents. The judge opened with one sentence that made the entire room fall silent. "This is not a place to resolve emotional disputes. We are here for legal matters, and here only the truth matters." The hearing began. Emma started by outlining the full picture: how my wedding assets had been reassigned without notice, funds moved from my personal accounts without permission, forged contracts, and the hidden threats in the unsigned prenuptial agreement. Then came the evidence. Each contract was displayed on screen. Each transaction, every line altered by hand. Even the audio transcript from my call with former accountant Mason Jennings was submitted to the record. The opposing side tried to argue that I had given implied consent by signing certain documents, but Emma countered with the original files showing digital signatures, revealing most agreements were edited after signing without my acknowledgement. Then came my mother's statement. She was composed, sitting upright, eyes trying to maintain their usual dignified air. But I noticed how tightly her hands clenched the edge of her coat. Willow has a psychological history. The family only wanted to help her stabilize. The financial reallocation was in the interest of everyone, not a scheme. The judge didn't react. She simply nodded and asked, "Is there any evidence that Miss Willow was clearly informed and gave explicit consent?" Silence. No one answered. That was the moment I knew I was no longer alone. At last, the truth wasn't hiding in whispers anymore. It stood clear in the open. After nearly 3 hours of proceedings, the judge ruled. The court acknowledges signs of irregularity in the financial transfers, misuse of the charity fund, and tampering with contractual records. Temporarily, authority over the disputed assets will be transferred to Ms. Willow Hartley, including access to all wedding accounts and documentation. Both parties will enter civil mediation within 60 days before a final ruling is issued. I simply tightened my grip on the binder and nodded to the judge. My mother turned her face away. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the midday sun hitting the cobbled path made me squint. Emma turned and asked quietly, "You okay?" I answered, soft as a breath. Better than staying silent. We hadn't won completely, but for the first time, everything was out in the open. No more tense dinner table arguments. No more subtle jabs like knives grazing skin. Now, everything had documents, files, legal transcripts. That afternoon, I returned to the small temporary apartment I rented downtown. On the kitchen counter lay the morning newspaper. Front page showed a photo of me walking out of the courtroom, eyes forward, head unbowed. Beneath the photo, the headline read, "Willow Hartley fights back. Prestigious Hartley family faces allegations of forgery and personal asset seizure." It was a chilly Thursday afternoon. I returned to the old house on Ashwood Street, where I had grown up, baked with my mother in the sunlit kitchen, and cried silently for things I couldn't name. The white gate was still ajar. The steps still had the tiny crack where my dad had fallen while fixing the awning that winter. But this time, I didn't come to revisit memories. I came to close them. I stepped in. No one greeted me. The house was empty, silent in a way that chilled the spine. The lavender oil scent was still there, but it no longer brought peace. I placed a manila envelope on the wooden dining table. Inside were the deed withdrawal form, a waiver of asset dispute, and the house keys. I didn't take anything else. I just left one short handwritten note. I no longer belong here. Maybe I never truly did. Willow. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No sender. Inside was a check for $38,200, with only one line in the memo field. Wedding contribution refund, frozen account dissolved. No apology, no handwritten message, but the amount was exact to the dollar, matching the spreadsheet I had submitted to court. I didn't take it to the bank. I framed it behind glass and placed it on my bookshelf, beneath the photo of me leaving the courthouse. Below the photo, I etched one sentence. Proof they knew they were wrong. About a month later, when the media began shifting focus away from the case, I redirected all the energy I had left into the one thing I knew how to do: rebuild from the wreckage. But not just for myself. I registered a new organization called Ashwood Resolve, a space for women manipulated financially by family, stripped of identity, autonomy, or defamed within their closest relationships. The official website had only one opening line: I don't need an apology, I need justice without delay. I started by hosting small community talks at the local library, opened free legal counseling sessions every Saturday, and connected with attorneys, therapists, accountants, people who had once stayed silent because of the power held by families that didn't want scandal. But now they were no longer silent. Emma was the first to agree to serve as the legal advisor to the foundation. Mason Jennings, the former accountant, became our honorary financial supervisor. And by the end of the year, over 300 women from different states had sent messages, emails, and signed up for counseling sessions. None of them needed a stage. They just needed a place to stand. On a late December morning, as snow began to fall, I sat by the window of my new apartment, just me and true quiet. Behind me were the heavy days, the battles that once seemed unwinnable. But ahead was a journey where I no longer had to beg for a place to exist. I didn't need to prove my worth to my family. I created that worth myself. And that is something no one can manipulate. Willow's story isn't just a journey of reclaiming personal justice. It's a powerful reminder of the subtle forms of manipulation that can exist within family itself. In real life, many, especially women, silently endure financial, reputational, and emotional control masked as love. But silence is not the solution. Willow chose to rise, not to retaliate, but to live truthfully. And that is the most enduring victory of all. What do you think about Willow's journey? If it were you, would you stay silent or stand up like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.